Why did Helaena jump from the window? House of the Dragon, warning, spoiler warning. This video contains major spoilers for House of the Dragon and Fire and Blood, including Helaena Targaryen's fate. One of the most tragic moments in the Dance of the Dragons is the death of Helaena Targaryen. After everything she has endured, Helaena eventually climbs to the window of the Red Keep and jumps. But why? Was Helaena driven to suicide by grief? Was she trying to escape the unbearable pressure surrounding her? Did her prophetic abilities play a role? Or was something else happening behind the scenes? Let's break down what happened to Helaena and why her death is so important. 1. Who is Helaena Targaryen? Helaena is the daughter of Alicent Hightower and King Viserys I Targaryen. She's also the sister and wife of Aegon II. Unlike many of the other Targaryens, Helaena isn't interested in political power. She's quiet, gentle, and fascinated by insects and unusual creatures. But she possesses something that makes her extremely important: prophetic abilities. Throughout the series, Helaena says strange things that initially sound meaningless. Later, viewers realize that some of her words appear to foreshadow future events. This makes her one of the most mysterious characters in the series. 2. Blood and cheese changes everything. The tragedy that pushes Helaena toward the breaking point begins with the murder of her son, Prince Jaehaerys. Blood and cheese enter the Red Keep and force Helaena to choose which of her sons should die. She refuses to make the choice. But the attackers kill Jaehaerys anyway. This completely destroys Helaena emotionally. She loses her child in one of the most horrific moments of the dance. And from that point forward, she is no longer the same person. 3. Helaena becomes increasingly isolated. After Jaehaerys' death, Helaena becomes increasingly withdrawn. She's surrounded by people, but emotionally, she's almost completely alone. Aegon is devastated and increasingly unstable. Alicent is struggling with her own guilt. The Green faction is losing control. And the war continues to demand sacrifices from everyone around her. Helaena doesn't have the personality to thrive in this environment. She isn't a warrior. She isn't a politician, and she doesn't want power. She's simply a mother who has lost her child. 4. Did her prophetic visions cause her death? This is one of the most interesting questions. Helena's visions are often presented in a cryptic way. She seems to understand events before they happen. She talks about things that other characters don't understand. And, as the war becomes more chaotic, her visions appear to become increasingly significant. But the show doesn't explicitly say Helaena killed herself because she saw the future. That's an interpretation. Her visions may have made her understand the terrible things that were coming. Or they may simply be another expression of the trauma she was experiencing. Either way, the connection between Helena's visions and her fate is deliberately mysterious. 5. Why did Helaena jump? The most straightforward explanation is that Helaena could no longer endure the emotional and psychological suffering surrounding her. She had lost her son. Her family was collapsing. The war was destroying the Targaryens, and she was trapped inside a world she never wanted. Her death can therefore be understood as an escape from unbearable circumstances. But the show also gives the moment a deeper meaning. Helaena has always seemed to understand that something terrible was coming. By the time she reaches the window, she may have realized that there was no future in which she could return to the peaceful life she once had. 6. Was Helaena murdered? There is an important distinction between the book and the show. In Fire and Blood, Helena's death is officially recorded as a suicide. But the book's historical account is deliberately unreliable. Some characters question whether she really chose to die. There are even rumors that political forces may have played a role in her death. This creates an important mystery. Did Helaena really jump, or was someone responsible for putting her in that position? The series can explore this ambiguity if it chooses to. 7. Why does Helena's death matter? Helena's death isn't just the death of another Targaryen. It has enormous political consequences. The people of King's Landing loved Helaena. She was one of the few members of the royal family who seemed innocent and disconnected from the brutality of the war. Her death therefore becomes another reason the population turns against the ruling regime, and it contributes to the growing chaos in King's Landing. Her death becomes part of the chain of events that eventually leads to the city's rebellion and the storming of the Dragon Pit. 8. The tragedy of Helaena. What makes Helena's story so tragic is that she never really wanted the war. She didn't choose the green cause, she didn't want the Iron Throne, she didn't ask to become a queen, and she certainly didn't choose to lose her child. Yet she becomes one of the war's greatest victims. Her prophetic abilities also make her story more tragic. Imagine being able to see fragments of terrible events, but being unable to stop them. Helaena may know that disaster is coming, but knowing the future doesn't necessarily mean you can change it. 9. Did Helaena know what was coming? This is where Helena's strange visions become especially important. Throughout House of the Dragon, Helaena says things that sound like nonsense to everyone around her. But viewers gradually realize that many of those statements may actually be warnings about events that haven't happened yet. She seems to understand things that other characters cannot see, and that makes her final moments even more disturbing. Because if Helaena really could see the future, there's a possibility that she already understood where her life was heading. She may have known that the war would continue. She may have known that King's Landing would eventually fall into chaos. And she may have understood that the Targaryen family was heading toward an almost unavoidable disaster. But there's an important distinction here. The show never confirms that Helaena jumped because she saw her own death. That's a theory. Her visions could be prophetic. They could be connected to her unusual sensitivity. Or they could represent the way her mind processes trauma and fear. The ambiguity is intentional, and it makes Helaena different from almost every other character in the story. Most characters are trying to change the future. Helaena seems to be someone who already knows that certain events are coming. 10. Why Helena's death is so important to the dance. Helena's death also has a huge effect on the people of King's Landing. This is something that can easily be overlooked when focusing only on the emotional tragedy. Helaena is one of the few members of the royal family who ordinary people actually sympathize with. She's gentle. She's not seen as a ruthless political player. And unlike Aegon, Aemond, or many of the other Targaryens, she isn't responsible for leading armies or ordering people into battle. So when she dies, the people don't simply see it as another royal death. They see it as proof that the war has destroyed someone who never wanted to be part of it. Her death becomes another reason the people lose faith in the ruling family, and that anger continues building until King's Landing eventually erupts. The storming of the Dragon Pit becomes one of the most devastating consequences of that growing resentment. Thousands of ordinary people turn against the dragons that once represented Targaryen power, and several dragons are killed. So Helena's death isn't just the end of her personal story. It becomes part of the chain reaction that helps destroy the Targaryens' control over King's Landing. 11. Could Helena's death be more complicated? There's one final question worth considering. Did Helaena truly choose to die? Or did the circumstances surrounding her make her death almost inevitable? The book presents her death as a suicide, but Fire and Blood is deliberately written as a history assembled from conflicting accounts. That means the reader isn't always given an objective version of events. Rumors, speculation, and political bias are constantly mixed together. This gives House of the Dragon room to explore the possibility that there was more happening behind the scenes. Perhaps Helaena was manipulated. Perhaps someone took advantage of her fragile emotional state. Perhaps her visions influenced her decisions. Or perhaps there really isn't a hidden conspiracy at all. Maybe the tragedy is exactly what it appears to be. A woman who suffered an unbearable loss and could no longer continue living with the consequences of the war. And that uncertainty is what makes Helena's story so heartbreaking. Final thoughts. So, why did Helaena jump from the window? The simplest explanation is that she had reached a breaking point. She lost Jaehaerys. Her family was falling apart. Her home no longer felt safe. And the war had taken away almost everything that once gave her a sense of normality. But Helena's story is more complicated than simply saying she was grieving. Her prophetic visions add another layer. If Helaena really could see pieces of the future, then perhaps she understood that the Targaryen conflict was heading toward even greater destruction. Maybe she knew there was no escape from what was coming. And that's what makes her death so haunting. The Targaryens spend the entire dance fighting for control of the future. But Helaena may have been the one character who could actually see that future, and she still couldn't change it. Her death also becomes a turning point for King's Landing. The people lose one of the few members of the royal family they genuinely sympathized with. The city's anger grows, and the Targaryens move closer to losing control of the capital. Helaena never wanted the throne. She never wanted the war. She never wanted to become part of the political game. She was simply born into a family that turned its own bloodline into a battlefield.